It's hard to place exactly where coffee shop modern started because it was a subtle transition out of streamline modern, but I read that the opinion is that it officially started with a place called Coffee Dan's. Oh, it's a pretty good name, I'd say. Coffee Dan's originated as a nightclub in San Francisco that morphed into a speakeasy during Prohibition, but then eventually became a coffee shop, and by the 40s was ready to expand into new cities. So the first Coffee Dan's opened in LA in 1946 at 452 Broadway. The men who designed this were Douglas Honnold and John Lautner.
Okay.
Their design was used in 4 coffee Dan's around the city that were built between 46 and 48. They're all gone now. Don't look for them.
Aww.
But these men's careers did not end there. But for the sake of a brief podcast, Honnold's did.
He's probably listening pissed.
Finally, they're going to talk about me.
What did it, Mrs. Honnold? What did it to him? You boys.
LA, meekly.
After we've killed an architect, go ahead and proceed. Proceed.
So let's talk about John Lautner, or should I say John Edward Lautner Jr.
Ooh, a
Another
junior.
Junior's back. He was born July 16th, 1911 in Marquette, Michigan, and ended up apprenticing for Frank Lloyd Wright for 6 years before he came to LA in 1939 to oversee a couple of Wright's projects, and he did not take kindly to LA. He said that when he got here and he drove down Santa Monica Boulevard, and I quote, "It was so ugly, it made me physically sick." And he stayed sick for a year. A year. He felt ill.
I'm pretty sure, if not Faulkner or Fitzgerald said something very similar. I think it was Charlie Parker who said almost those exact words.
They all congregated in the desert to talk about how gross Santa Monica Boulevard is. But what made him sick, though, wasn't just the sunglasses and the surf trunks. He hated LA because he knew it could be so much more.
Oh, he saw potential.
He saw potential.
Like an Abbott Kinney.
He felt like, he was Abbott Kidney. Who? That was his stage name because kidney shapes are very good.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
He felt that the architects up to that point had not made full use of what they had here. So in 1943, Lautner split off from working for Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm thinking of Edgar Wright, who Googie owes a lot to, not Edgar Wright.
Yeah.
Forget I said Edgar Wright. Stricken from the record. And started doing military projects, Lautner did, not Edgar Wright again. And then houses, not Edgar Wright's house. And then he moved on. And then he moved on to places for the people and creating Googie with places like Coffee Dan's and Henry's Drive-In. And then in 1949, he laid the big one. Googie's!
Oh.
I read that it was it's called Googie's. I read that it was at 8100 Sunset Boulevard, which is right across the street from the Garden of Allah, where Fitzgerald died. But then I also read that it was at the intersection of Crescent Heights, a little further east. But in the pictures, it's literally connected to Schwab's Pharmacy, which was even further east at 8024 Sunset Boulevard. Schwab's was also where Fitzgerald's Accursed Hershey Bar was from.
I don't know if he died at the Garden of Allah. I know he stayed there, but I don't think he died there. I don't think he did. I think he died in North Hollywood at Sheila's apartment.
Oh, you're right.
Want to start over?
Yeah, let's do this whole thing again.
He lived at Garden of Allah.
He did live there. All right, he didn't die there. Bruno, delete the draft of the email.
Don't hit. Oh, he hit send. Well, we'll just ignore it.
Let's read this email live. It's Magoo. He's suing us. He didn't die there. There was a Hershey bar bought in this area.
Show me the receipt.
There had to have been a second bite. So Lautner designed the place for Googie's for a guy named Mort Burton, which is a very old name. And it was named after Burton's wife, who had big eyes. So he would call her Googie after the wide-eyed cartoon character named Barney Google.
Okay.
He was in the funny pages.
No.
Just like we will be Sunday.
I'll see you in the funny pages. Did
see
you say someday or
I meant to say someday, but they do come out on Sundays. So let's Bruno.
I liked what you did with the mistake. You worked it well.
This restaurant, it had the signature glass facade that Googie's known for, but what really set it apart was it had a regular sort of roof. Then all of a sudden it shot upwards.
Shut up, really?
As if it were a ramp.
A skateboarding ramp?
Yeah, this is also where the Lords of Dogtown came from. The Z-Boys. It could seat 65 people, and because of its location, it became a celebrity hotspot. Some of the regulars were Natalie Wood, Jane Mansfield, and James Dean.
Natalie Wood?
Most of those people died tragically.
Horribly, yeah.
Here's a good story. In February 1957, some tough thug came into Googie's and announced, "I'm gonna kill me every Jew in this place." Luckily, Lenny Bruce was eating there at the time. And depending on which story you believe, he either started singing "When Israel Was was in Egypt land, let my people go. Or he went up to the guy and introduced himself as Super Jew, which was a character of his. But whichever one you believe, the result was that he was thrown through that giant signature Googie plastic plate window. Lenny Bruce went flying through a window, and then he got a drug problem. Now, at this time, there was still no official name for the coffee shop modern style. It went by names like Doo-Wop,
I like that.
Jet Age,
I like that.
Space Age. You're going to like these two. Populux, whatever.
Oh, okay, I like that.
And Ray Gun Gothic.
I love that.
I thought you would.
I'm going to write that down while you keep talking. Ray Gun Gothic. We're changing the name of the podcast.
Reagan Gothic. Until one day, a Yale professor, who is also the editor of House and Home magazine.
That's me snoring, sorry.
You don't... Look, I'm only reading it for the articles.
The centerfolds in that thing.
Douglas Haskell was being driven down Sunset. His name was Douglas Haskell. He was being driven down. He was being driven down Sunset Boulevard when they passed by Googie's, and he yelled, "Stop the car! This is Googie architecture." He then wrote an article in the February 1952 issue of his magazine called "Googie Architecture." The article was not positive towards Googie,
oh boy,
and it was written in the voice of a made-up Professor Thug. Who was not Thug? That's the guy who beat up Lenny Bruce. Professor Thrug.
He was a professor.
I'm Professor Anti-Semite.
But you call me Thug.
But I go by my street name, Thug Hitler. Thuggy Riefenstahl. So his name was Professor Thrug, who was obsessed with Googie. It's satire, Greg. Satire.
Like a satirical piece of humor?
Yeah, it's kind of like what they do on Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, the Kimballs. Jimmy Kimballs, as my dad calls it.
But the name Googie stuck, and now this style was finally called Ray Gun Gothic. It was called Googie now, for better or worse. Greg will say worse. For the restaurant itself, a new partner was brought on board named Ernest Goldenfeld in 1955.
The names back then.
So he came on in 1955, and he started pushing towards growing the Googie brand. Okay. Googie's brand, rather. That same year, let me say it one more time, Googie. That same year, they bought up the lot around the restaurant and turned it into a retail center designed by our man Davis, who Greg will get to. Then a second Googie's opened up downtown at 5th and Olive, nearby where Wyatt Earp was arrested for a crooked Pharaoh game. That was also designed by our man Davis. There was supposedly a third location that was opened at Roxbury and Wilshire in Beverly Hills, but I can't find any proof of that other than one sentence. Bruno, come on, Bruno. 40 emails? Investors wanted to open up a national chain of Googie's, but Burton didn't think it was a good idea, and he insisted on doing things the old-fashioned way, which meant failing. So they had started hurting when Schwab's expanded in 1956, and their rent got raised to $25,000 a month, but they were taking in around $15,000 a month, and Lenny Bruce was not leaving good tips. Eventually, Googie's was sold to Bob Wyan of Bob's Big Boy for $300,000, who kept it going for a while, but in 1984, the downtown location closed, and by 1989, the original one had been torn down. If it was at the Schwab's area, it's now a beautiful Trader Joe's. Or if it's a little further down, it might be a CVS. Lautner's reputation took a hit from being associated as the guy who created Googie, but he still managed to make a huge impact on the city. He designed the UPA studios.
Did he?
Speaking of Magoo.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, everything's coming together.
Yeah.
I love it when it comes together. Hey, wait, I want to say something. Yeah. Lautner also lectured for a little bit at the Chouinard Art Institute in the early 60s before Disney turned it into Cal Arts. He was also the architect for the 1984 Olympics, but his two most notable private housing creations in the city are Silvertop at 2138 Mitchell
Trina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Greg. You can read my mind. It's in Silver Lake. Greg lives there. Which was,
you know my secret now.
So this project was started in 1956, but it had so much drama along the way that it wasn't completed until 1974. Imagine just like living in a house where like your bathroom is just like a tarp for 2 decades. The second big one is the Malin House, or the Chemosphere, at 7776 Torreyson Drive in the hills above Studio City, which Encyclopedia Britannica called the most modern home built in the world.
Wow.
It's also Googie, as is Silvertop. It was made in 1960, and it's considered the best known house in LA. Being a landmark of LA, it also has a very sad history. One of the former owners of the house, Dr. Richard Kuhn, something, Kuhn, who had... Shut up. who had won the Nobel Prize in 1938 and then went on to survive the Holocaust, was stabbed to death in the chemosphere during a robbery.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's lived in by the Taschens of the Taschen Book Company. Yeah. Lautner died in 1994, but his importance is kind of unsung considering he really was a major force in forming LA's image.
Yeah.
Although all of his old models and his designs were donated to the Getty Research Institute in 2007 for perusing if you have the proper credentials. And July 16th, his birthday, has been designated John Lautner Day throughout Los Angeles.
Do I have to get him anything?
You have to go break into the Getty Institute and steal his designs back and scatter them in the Pacific Ocean, as he always wanted.
As is stated in his will.
The font, all the letters were boomerangs in different shapes.
It was really hard to read because every separate letter had its own diamond.